April 15th, 1945, southwest of Bergen, Nazi Germany. British tanks rolled through the gates of a living nightmare, Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. What they discovered would haunt them for the rest of their lives. 13,000 rotting corpses scattered like discarded dolls. 60,000 walking skeletons barely clinging to life. Among the Nazi monsters captured that day was a 22-year-old woman whose beauty concealed the soul of a demon. Her name was Irma Grese, and her story will freeze you to your core. This video contains detailed descriptions of extreme violence, severe abuse, and systematic mass killing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. These are documented historical facts about real atrocities committed against real people. October 7th, 1923. In the small German town of Reschen, a baby girl took her first breath. Nobody could predict that this innocent child would become one of history's most sadistic killers. Irma Grese was born into a simple dairy farming family, the third of 5 children in what appeared to be an ordinary household. But ordinary was the last thing Irma would ever be. Her father, Alfred, despised the rising Nazi movement with every fibre of his being. When Hitler's propaganda machine kicked into high gear in 1933, young children across Germany were being funneled into Nazi youth organisations, but not the Grese children. Alfred refused to let them join, even when they begged him. He had no idea he was trying to contain a monster. But you can't escape evil when it's being pumped through every classroom, every radio broadcast, every street corner. German schools had become Nazi indoctrination centres. Hitler's portrait stared down at children from classroom walls like a perverted father figure. Textbooks taught hatred as casually as arithmetic. Young Irma absorbed it all like a sponge soaking up poison. Then tragedy struck, and this is where her transformation truly began. In 1936, when Irma was just 13 years old, her mother took her own life after discovering her husband's affair. But wait until you hear what really happened that night. The woman who could have been Irma's moral anchor was gone, leaving her in the hands of an increasingly brutal father who used his fists to discipline his children. The combination was toxic: a shattered home, Nazi indoctrination, and a father who taught her that violence was the answer to everything. School became a nightmare. Irma was viciously bullied, her grades plummeted, and at 14 she dropped out entirely. This awkward, broken teenager would spend the next few years drifting, 6 months on a farm, 6 months in a retail shop, searching for something she couldn't name. But evil was calling, and soon she would answer in the most terrifying way possible. At 15, Irma found work at the Hohenlychen sanatorium as a nursing assistant. This wasn't just any medical facility. It was run by Karl Gebhardt, a Nazi physician who would later conduct horrific medical experiments on concentration camp prisoners. For 2 years, young Irma worked under this monster, watching, learning, and slowly being stripped of her humanity. But here's the terrifying part. She wasn't just observing these experiments. Documents later revealed that she actively participated, even at this young age. She dreamed of becoming a full nurse, but her poor academic record destroyed those hopes. Instead, she was sent to operate a butter-churning machine on a dairy farm. Imagine this broken, rejected teenager churning butter day after day. Her resentment built like pressure in a boiler. She was 17 years old, full of rage, and about to find the perfect outlet for her fury. The train doors opened at Ravensbrück concentration camp, and Irma Grese stepped into her true calling. Ravensbrück was Nazi Germany's primary women's camp, a killing centre where 132,000 women passed through its gates and 92,000 never left alive. This is where Irma would learn to kill. But the methods she developed would surpass anything her instructors could have imagined. The camp was run by 150 female guards under the brutal leadership of Dorothea Binns, her sadistic instructor who taught her trainees one simple rule: extract maximum work from the prisoners until they die, then extract more. Ravensbrück wasn't just a concentration camp, it was a system that trained violence, graduating 3,500 female guards who spread their learned cruelty across Nazi-occupied Europe. But Ravensbrück offered Irma something even more sinister: a front-row seat to Karl Gebhardt's medical experiments. The same doctor from her nursing days shattered limbs with tools, infecting wounds with deadly bacteria, and performed amputations without anesthesia. 80 women, mostly Polish, were selected for these experiments. Many died in agony. Those who survived were left permanently crippled. 18-year-old Irma assisted in these procedures. She watched women beg for mercy as their bones were broken and wounds deliberately infected. She saw them die slowly, painfully, crying out for mothers they would never see again. And instead of horror, she felt excitement. The broken teenager who had been bullied and beaten finally had control. She loved every second of it. But what happened next would make her crimes at Ravensbrück look like child's play. When Irma went home in 1943 and casually mentioned her work supervising prisoners, her father flew into a rage. He assaulted her with a belt and forbade her from ever returning. But it was too late. The monster had been unleashed. In March 1943, she was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau, the most infamous killing machine in human history. And this is where Irma Grese would write her name in blood across the pages of history. Auschwitz-Birkenau was death industrialized. This massive complex could process thousands of human beings per day, turning men, women, and children into ash and smoke with ruthless efficiency. This is where Irma Grese earned her most terrifying nickname, the Beautiful Beast. At first glance, she seemed like an angel. Survivors described her as stunningly beautiful. Perfect features, an angelic face, and the most innocent blue eyes you could imagine. Dr. Gisela Pearl, a former prisoner, called her one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen. But beneath that angelic exterior lurked something unspeakably evil. The shy, bullied teenage girl was gone forever. At Auschwitz, Irma discovered she could hit people who couldn't hit back, and she was addicted to the power. She carried a special whip, braided leather covered in cellophane so the blood would wash off easily. Every morning she stood at the camp gates as work parties passed through, randomly beating prisoners for no reason other than her own perverted pleasure. It was a very light whip, she later boasted, but if I hit someone with it, it would hurt. When camp commandant Josef Kramer ordered her to stop using the whip, because even he found her violence excessive, she ignored him and continued beating prisoners anyway. Think about that for a moment. A man who ran Auschwitz, a facility designed for industrial genocide, thought Irma Grese was too violent. But wait until you hear about her most disturbing habit, one that even hardened SS officers found disgusting. By May 1944, at just 20 years old, Irma was promoted to senior overseer of Camp C at Birkenau, supervising 30,000 Hungarian Jewish prisoners crammed into a space designed for 300. The overcrowding was so extreme that 5 people had to share bunks meant for one, while others slept on bare floors covered in human waste. This was Irma's kingdom of terror. She forced prisoners to stand holding heavy stones above their heads for hours. If they wavered, she beat them unconscious. During roll call, which lasted from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., prisoners had to stand perfectly still in freezing weather. Any movement earned them a beating or hours of kneeling in mud. But Irma's cruelty went far beyond random violence. She was sexually depraved, taking lovers from both male and female prisoners. When she grew bored with her victims, she selected them for the gas facilities. She reportedly had affairs with the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele and used their relationship to participate in selections, deciding who would live as a slave and who would die immediately. Here's where it gets really sick. Survivor Olga Lengyel wrote that Grese deliberately selected beautiful prisoner women for death out of jealousy and spite. She couldn't stand the thought of any woman being more attractive than her, so she sent them to their deaths with a smile on her face. The most chilling aspect of Irma's personality was how she enjoyed suffering. When the 2 dogs she deliberately starved attacked prisoner women, she watched with bloodshot eyes and a smile on her face, intoxicated by the sight of blood. When prisoners carrying stones lost control of their wagon, she set her dogs on them and watched with glee as they were torn apart. But there was one prisoner she saved 16 times from the gas facilities, and the reason for this will leave you speechless. That prisoner was 14-year-old Alice Tenenbaum. Every time Dr. Mengele selected her for death, Irma would march into the gas chamber area and pull Alice out. Why? Because Alice reminded her of her sister, Helen. Even in her depravity, some twisted part of Irma's psyche still recognized familial bonds. Yet this same woman would kill thousands of other people's sisters, mothers, and daughters without hesitation. The psychological complexity of this monster defies comprehension, and her final crimes would prove even more shocking. As Soviet forces approached Auschwitz in January 1945, Irma joined the death marches, forced evacuations where prisoners walked hundreds of miles in sub-zero temperatures. Those who fell were shot on the spot. But even during this chaos, Irma found ways to inflict additional suffering on the dying prisoners under her watch. She ended up at Bergen-Belsen in March 1945, where conditions were so horrific that 250 to 300 people died daily from starvation and disease. Prisoners had to share 200 blankets among tens of thousands, sleeping sitting up on floors covered in excrement. They received only watery turnip soup and a piece of bread per day. Even as the Nazi regime crumbled around her, Irma continued her reign of terror. She stripped prisoner women naked and beat them with rubber truncheons. She forced dying women to perform grueling exercises until they collapsed. Just days before liberation, she was seen beating a girl with a riding crop and smashing the heads together of 2 sisters caught eating potato peels. The prisoners at Bergen-Belsen, despite knowing her for only 3 weeks, nicknamed her the Beast of Belsen. But here's what's truly frightening. When British forces were literally at the gates, Irma was still abusing prisoners. She couldn't stop. The addiction to cruelty had completely consumed her. April 17th, 1945. 2 days after liberation, British forces captured Irma Grese, along with other Nazi war criminals. When an English journalist asked why she had committed such atrocities, she answered without shame, "Our duty was to destroy antisocial elements, so that Germany's future would be secured." Even in captivity, she showed no remorse. During her trial at the Belsen War Crimes Tribunal, as witnesses testified about her cruelty, she claimed they were all lying and making an elephant out of a small fly. She admitted to beatings but denied directly killing anyone, as if that somehow made her less monstrous. The evidence against her was overwhelming. Survivor after survivor took the stand to describe her sadistic cruelty. The tribunal heard how she tortured, beat, and sent countless innocent people to their deaths for her own perverted entertainment. But even facing death, Irma maintained her arrogance. She spent her final weeks in prison styling her hair and daydreaming about becoming a movie star after the war. She genuinely believed she would be acquitted and become famous for her experiences. The delusion was complete. November 17th, 1945. the British military tribunal sentenced 22-year-old Irma Grese to execution by hanging. She was the youngest woman executed under British law in the 20th century. December 13th, 1945. Albert Pierre Point, Britain's most experienced executioner, prepared the gallows. As Irma walked to her death, she spoke only one word: Schnell, quickly. Even facing eternity, she was impatient. The rope tightened. The beautiful beast was no more.